we're ready to pull the cam out now. This isn't a total necessity, although it does recommend it in the book. Recommends that before you pull the cam you get the marks lined up, which you can see there that they are. And interestingly, the marks are to be lined up when the number 6 cylinder is in firing position, not number 1. I think that's a mistake some people make. So number 6 in firing position, which I do have, and we'll go ahead and we'll remove this pusher. Well, not yet. First, we're going to go ahead and get the fuel pump eccentric off. We'll rotate it slightly so we can access the cam plate nuts and back those out, and then we'll put the crank back up with the marks on the gear pointing up. So it's not hard to get it back if you get it out of position, but it's a good double check to keep it in that position if you can. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll be back when we're ready to pull the camshaft out. Well, sorry, I forgot to turn the camera on when I pulled the camshaft out, but the camshaft is out, and I've got the pusher off of the crankshaft hub. If y'all want to see what that looks like, you've got a spacer, and then you've got a fine threaded portion which threads in where the crankshaft bolt threads in, and then of course thread here. And this is a really nice pusher that was made based on drawings that Ingvar Vick drew up and put in turning wheels many years ago. I think back in the late 70s, early 80s. So I've used this a lot. People have borrowed it. It's very handy. I have a similar one for the camshaft also. And I do want to mention one thing. I spoke a little too soon. I really did not need to pull this fuel pump eccentric off the camshaft, but that's fine. That's fine. We'll make sure it's torqued on correctly when we get everything back together. So next step is to pull the crank gear off, and so let me get that puller set up and I'll be back. Alright, we're set up to pull off this crank pulley. I just use a steering wheel puller. I've got harmonic balancer pullers, things like that, but this is easier. This is a long snout crank, so I don't quite have enough room to use my brass thread protector. So what I've done is I put a couple of washers with a lot of never sees on. That'll help protect the end of the crank. So let's go ahead. I'm not going to put you through all of this, but I'll just show you. This does do a good job pulling this thing off. I have sprayed a little WD-40 on it, but you can see this is coming right off. Not a problem. Right off it comes. So now we can pull the thrust. Oh, we've got to get the key out first. No, actually you can get the thrust plate out without the key. So let me get something to bump that with. There it comes. go. Oop, there's my other washer. That was on there. And we've got a fair amount of shims there, so we should be good. I'm going to get that apart and then we'll come back. Alright, the shim's removed. I've got the pusher tool on, cleaned everything up. Got startup lubricant there on the thrust, and so we're going to go ahead and push on this gear, and you'll see this pusher is really nice. It really does a good job, and sure beats banging it on, and sure beats trying to heat it up to get it on. It definitely is a lot better than trying to pull it in with the bolt. Alright. Let me get my bar in so we can make sure it's tight. Alright, so that's on. Let's see if we can pop this off. There we go. Alright, so that's in. Let's get the zero marks back up top. That'll work. Alright, we're good on that. We can go ahead and get the crankshaft ready to go in. Alright, the crank gear's back on, the camshaft is back in. There's really not much to see putting the camshaft in because you're not going to be able to see it because I'm going to be standing there doing that, so I didn't show that. Notice it's the gears are lubed up real good. One thing I want to talk about, the bolts for the timing, the cam gear thrust plate. These are special bolts. They've got a small head and a small diameter thin lock washer. I was reading in one of the recent turning wheels where some bolts that were a little bit longer got put in, and there was a kind of a knocking noise on the front of the engine. It turned out to be the cam gear hitting the bolts to hold the thrust plate in. So make sure you have the right bolts. Make sure you put the correct bolts back in and the correct lock washers. These thrust plate bolts get tightened to right around 15. I think it was somewhere between 13 and 17 was the range, foot-pounds, and I use my inch-pound torque wrench to do these small ones. So figure 15 foot-pounds times 12 is 180 inch-pounds. And they say to tighten them up evenly. So we'll do that. I've already snugged them up. As you can tell, I do not have a 1/4" drive click wrench. That's okay. Alright, all that's back. I do want to put the slinger back on, and I also want to put the eccentric for the fuel pump back on. And there is a little notch in that washer, so you got to make sure that little notch right there gets in the right place. Wipe that out. I like these microfiber towels. They don't seem to leave any pieces of cloth. Alright, and that gets torqued to camshaft gear screw 20 to 25. So we're going to go ahead and do that. You've seen me torque, so I'm not going to make you watch that.